Hey guys, welcome back to Russian Libertas Corpus YouTube channel, where we, Alexei Postnikov and Gala Bagadova, talk about Russian society, Russian politics, and how things are in Russia in general. And we made a video, check it out here, our part 2 of colonial history of Russia, where we kind of touched upon the subject of collective responsibility, collective guilt, which was a big thing for all Russians who were against this war since the day one, vocally or in their heads. And I think our problem, I dealt with that feeling of collective, I called it collective responsibility, but in fact it was the feeling of collective guilt, because I felt that I'm one of the people to blame for what's happening in Ukraine, and it's a big weight on your conscience. That's why we're making this shorter video about collective responsibility, collective guilt, and also individual responsibility and individual guilt, with some historical examples of spoiler, Nazi Germany, because
Of course.
we're at this stage when this is the comparison and analogy we can make, and maybe it's the most accurate in a lot of ways, with all the unperfectness of historical analogies.
So as you mentioned, this is a huge way to feel the guilt that you kind of a contribution to whatever is happening right now. However, I would say the guilt, when you feel the guilt, it is an incredible distraction for you to take actions. So for that, it's really important to separate those, right? Yeah. The collective responsibility, collective guilt, and their equivalents of individual versions. So collective guilt is something that you feel you're a part of, that is in charge of or guilty of certain catastrophic consequences. And the feeling of guilt is directed to the past. Something happened and you feel guilty.
Yeah.
Right? And it is only the feeling that is that has the perspective to the backwards, that you cannot change anything.
Also, if we're going to talk about guilt in the legal sense, guilt, you can be guilty of crime. And let's say if, war in Ukraine is a crime.
Sure.
The question though, because again, a lot of people from Russian immigration, people around the world, we're not talking about Ukrainians now because they have right to feel any feeling they feel, but people around the world who are not involved directly in the conflict, in the war, sometimes make this connection. They do not separate guilt and responsibility,
right.
And they have a tendency to blame all Russians for the crime that is war
right.
in Ukraine.
Right.
But what I think is important, and now we're probably going to go to our first, to our historical analogy for the first time, were all people in Germany, Nazi Germany, responsible for genocide and the war Hitler started?
That's the thing, to recognize the difference between guilt and responsibility, because when you say guilty of, right, you understand that this person has done something wrong knowingly, and for that is guilty of whatever's happening. This is not even a chance for you to change the situation. This is a chance for you to bear the punishment of for the consequences. The responsibility instead does not necessarily imply that you're guilty of something. You might be a part of the process that led to certain circumstances, but you either did not have access to the leverage of power to manage the situation, or you were not aware that this will lead to the consequences. It can be both, right? So guilt is knowingly having power over the process, being being the reason, being the creator of the problem. While responsibility means it's the direction to the future. It's you are in the position to change the situation from now,
Right.
because you are a part of this process, willingly or not. You are responsible right now, and responsibility and guilt are two different concepts, legal concepts, and I wouldn't say that legal. I'm not a lawyer, so I wouldn't really.
Well, at least ethical concepts
Ethical
too,
concepts, the concept, they're a little bit different. Even sometimes they are used interchangeably. So responsibility is when you are in charge of changing the situation.
Right. So let's say let's use our Nazi Germany analogy once again. So as you probably heard of and hopefully know about Nuremberg process, which was the big trial, post-war trial, where the top-ranking Nazi officials were facing charges in genocide, criminal war, war crimes, all that. A lot of them, most of them were found guilty. I think maybe one or two actually proved they were not found guilty of the crimes, of specific crimes, which is again genocide, war crimes, so on. But that was the part of the process of actually incorporating Germany back into the world community, because you cannot put the whole German nation on trial. Ethically you maybe can, but also if it's going to do any good or not, that's a big question, and I think not at all. But they prosecuted top-ranking Nazis. They started process of the denazification, and arguably it didn't went as well as it wasn't ideal at all, because a lot of officials in post-war Germany were Nazi administrative officials. They understood that it's impossible to prosecute every member of a Nazi party as well.
Yeah, and you know what? The interesting part of it is that they found some individual guilt in certain personas. They found the collective responsibility of the people at the same time. And look what happened. The entity of this country has been dismantled into two. So after this reconstruction, it became a new identity, basically, almost, right? The Western Eastern part. And after that happening, the country actually fell apart and changed. So the guilt of the nation was basically transformed into the sense of responsibility, because it's a different country now, more or less.
Yeah,
right?
And also, if we're going to talk about responsibility now, direct into the future, what I think, again, post-war Germany is a great example for future Russia, I hope, of understanding, processing this war and the genocide and the war crimes, and just the horrific nature of Nazi party and Nazi regime, by educating future generations, by showing them the consequences of Hitler's actions, by organizing groups of students from the school to go and visit death camps. Russian people are not a political actor in Russia. Nobody cares about what Russian people actually thinks in general sense, especially now. So when this is all going to be over, and it will be over at some point, and hopefully it will be over sooner than later, and with less victims of this war, and hopefully without Putin in the end in charge of Russia.
Hopefully.
Yes. Then I think it's going to be our responsibility as Russians to talk about this, to talk about crimes committed,
Exactly.
to punish the people who are responsible for those crimes.
That's called transitional justice.
Yeah.
We need to go through the process of transitional justice, and that's exactly what you said. The responsibility is not to stay blind, as you mentioned, right?
Yeah.
To go and see exactly what happened, to go and recognize this, to go and pronounce it, to go and confess things that you like, because the responsibility is also recognizing, pronouncing, taking action, and punish the guilty. Right?
Yes. We live in the age of narratives, and narratives are really powerful, maybe even more powerful than they were like 80 years ago. And we as Russians cannot let this narrative of, like all Russians are guilty of that prevail in the end, because not for our selfish reasons, because we are Russians, we don't want to be guilty, but because we just cannot have a whole country, pretty big country with a lot of people, end up in isolation, because it's gonna backfire badly. I would, guys, call you for a conversation. If you think otherwise, if you have arguments in the contra to our statement and the distinction between guilt and responsibility, I would be very curious to, start a conversation and see your perspective, your point of view, right? Because I would like to understand, maybe it is just the paradigm of Russophobia that is pretty illusional. But if you think otherwise or you agree with us, I would love to learn more about your perspective and have a conversation. Yeah. And once again, that's it for today. Please like this video if you like it. Subscribe to the channel and share this video with your friends who might find it also interesting to talk and think about responsibility and guilt. Because it's it's interesting and it's important to know the difference. And I think everybody should know that. Well, those who are interested, you're very welcome to engage in a conversation. Sorry, I'm done preaching. That's it for today. I'll also hit the bell. I forgot the bell. Damn. Yeah. See you next time. Bye-bye. Bye.